Hey there! Did you know Kroger always gives you savings and rewards on top of our lower-than-low prices? And when you download the Kroger app, you'll enjoy over $500 in savings every week with digital coupons. And don't forget fuel points to help you save up to $1 per gallon at the pump. Want to save even more? With a Boost membership, you'll get double fuel points and free delivery. So shop and save big at Kroger today. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Savings may vary by state. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Skating Penguin Network. Welcome back to another Penscast Mailbag. I am your host, Garrett, and typically, this is a three-man booth. Typically, we record with myself, Robbie Noggle, and Snail. However, Robbie is unavailable this week, so it is me, and I am joined once again by the slow-moving Snail out in the Pacific Northwest. We have 18 questions to get through this week from our loyal listeners, and before we get the show on the road here, if you'd like to contribute to a future edition of this mailbag, you can do so by following the Skating Penguin Network on X/Twitter, whatever it's called today. You can follow us at PenguinsFFSN. Every Sunday, we will send out a mailbag tweet asking for your participation in these mailbag episodes like we are about to get underway right now. So, Snail will get question number 1. I will take question number 2, and we will rotate until we have all 18 questions complete. So, Snail, you get question number 1. Question number 1 comes from the always reliable, dependable Brian. He's here back with another question. Who is one player or event that you would like to see a documentary made about? I think a Lemieux documentary would be awesome to have. Give the people who missed him insight on all of the challenges he faced throughout his Hall of Fame career.
Yeah, I agree. Give us an in-depth Lemieux doc. I think that'd be awesome. I mean, he was really, I think there's a couple generations of hockey fans now that, Lemieux's just a legend to them, and I think he deserves that doc. I was thinking the first two guys that kind of came to mind is like, you'd have to wait till it's all said and done, but like give us like a Gino Malkin documentary, or Letang. They've both had, okay, like Malkin, there's just not a lot about him out in the media. Like, I feel like go through YouTube, go through the internet. He doesn't really speak he kind of speaks to the press, but there's just not, Sid has he has his own documentary on YouTube from quite a while ago. And then he came out with a book or a audiobook on Amazon pretty recently. And Gino's been, kind of, a little bit cast in the shadow of Sid, but he's been so important to this franchise, and he has a Hall of Fame career. Because of the language barrier, we don't know a ton of details about his personal life, and from what I understand is he's a hilarious guy, and he's got a sense of humor and a great personality. I'd love to see that exposed through a documentary about his upbringing and whatnot, and his career, and maybe what it was like being, having the talent of being a number one in any other market, but he was number 2 behind Sid, and maybe how that kind of affected his mindset and his playing career. Letang as well. Letang has had an interesting career being our number 1 D-man, and he's had just a slew of pretty insane health issues here and there pop up, and he continues to just push forward and be this incredible athlete and a leader on this team. So I think both of those guys kind of deserve their own I think they deserve their day in the spotlight. What about you, Garrett? Is there anybody I'm not thinking about? I think Lemieux's a great one too, like what Brian said. I'd love that. But anyone else?
There's one thing, I was looking at this question earlier, and there may even be a documentary on this at this point that I've just never come across. I would love to see from start to finish the documentary and what went into Sidney Crosby's rehabilitation while he was dealing with his concussion issues in 2010/2011. I think having Crosby get robbed of his prime, his real athletic prime, and, what we could have seen from a player of Crosby's caliber at 24, 25 years old. And we didn't really get that because he was dealing with so many head-related injuries. And back in 2011, we were starting to really understand how severe these concussions can really be and how they can really harm a player's health. And so now, 10, 12, almost 15 years later, I'd like to see that revisited and see how he was able to push through, because there were genuine conversations that were mumbling around. I remember tuning in on ESPN and everyone was wondering, would the game's greatest player at that point, would the face of the league ever play another professional hockey game again? And obviously he did. He had that very memorable, iconic comeback against the New York Islanders in November of 2011. And then he would miss a stretch of games after that as well, but then he would eventually come back as a full-time player. And he's dealt with a couple of concussions, I believe, since then. He's obviously taken very good care of his health, and I think he does know, obviously, how dangerous these concussions can be. But yeah, I'd love to see a documentary highlighting the game that he went down. I think it was the Winter Classic against the Capitals, and then it was re-aggravated a couple games later in a game against the Tampa Bay Lightning, and all of that rehabilitation process to come back to the top of the mountain and lead the Penguins as their captain once again.
I think that's a great one. I've heard like little whispers maybe here and there on podcasts about, what Sid went through as far as rehab, but I think like an in-depth look and a documentary kind of about that. That's a great one, Garrett. All right, let's move on to question 2 here from Brian. And I love that this question is for Garrett because Garrett loves fighting. So who is your all-time favorite enforcer that has come through Pittsburgh? Brian's would have to be Aaron Asham. He'll never forget when he 2-punch KO'd Jay Beagle and the celebration after. That was iconic.
It was Aaron Asham. Was that the celebration where he did like the Snail? You might not even be a wrestling fan, but was that where he did like the go to sleep CM Punk go to sleep taunt, like on his way to the penalty box?
I don't know wrestling, but it was the where he did the little like put his hands together,
yes,
like go to sleep, and then kind of a little bow. Oh yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. Okay. That's iconic. But I was looking at some lists. Snail is right. Yeah, I'm a big, and this is all sarcastic font, I'm a big fan of the fights and the punchy. But looking at there have been some very notable names that have come through Pittsburgh. Georges Laraque was the first name that came to mind. I mean, that dude was what, 6'3", 6'4", 270 pounds. He was brought in the early years of the Crosby Malkin era, but I think it was by Michel Therrien to basically protect Crosby and Malkin and pummel his opponents. So Georges Laraque, there's a guy that made a lot of different lists. It was way before my time. His name is Paul Baxter. He played in 202 games for the Penguins. And in those 202 games I think it was the early 80s, throughout 202 games played, he accrued 851 penalty minutes and 31 fights, all with the Penguins. So that is another one who was not afraid to throw his weight around and throw the fists as well. We mentioned Eric Goddard, we mentioned Aaron Asham. We didn't mention Eric Goddard, another 6'4" big man. Ryan Reeves, most recently, I guess you could label him as an enforcer. He's known to fight from time to time. Gary Roberts, another player before my time, but is certainly, has a reputation here in Pittsburgh, especially for I think it was the 07/08, maybe 09 playoff run. I remember What Would Gary Roberts Do? That was sort of populating on the early social media circles in the Penguins fandom. You have Rick Tocchet as well, who I haven't even mentioned. So yeah, there's quite a few players who have come through and worn the black and gold who you could realistically put on any sort of enforcer list and be afraid of. But those are just a couple of the few that have come to my mind. I don't know if I could give you a favorite. I don't know if I really have a favorite, but those are certainly more of the notable enforcers that have come through and dropped the gloves while wearing the black and gold.
I got to mention Tom Sestito. This is my opportunity to finally really express my fandom for this Tom Sestito that played in Pittsburgh in 2016 and 17. This dude, I was talking a little bit with Garrett about this before I saw this question and I was like, oh my God, this is my chance to talk about Tommy Sestito. So this is actually the headline of an article written by SB Nation, written by Mary Clark. And it says the headline literally reads, "The Penguins called up a talentless goon and the NHL let him make a mess." And that was a game against the Winnipeg Jets where Gino had to answer the bell against Blake Wheeler, and they fought. And then the next shift, Tom Sestito's looking up and down the Winnipeg Jets bench, and him and Chris Thorburn go at it. Tom Sestito actually has his name on the cup. I don't think he scored. I should probably double check this, but I don't think he scored a single goal for the Penguins. But he had Mike Sullivan's trust when he was assistant coach with Vancouver under Torts. Torts really liked Sestito. The Penguins, when Sullivan came in, they signed Sestito to a contract. And anyways, I just had to say that quick. I love Tom Sestito. Tom, if you're listening, I love you, pal. Anyways, I think I like him and Georges Laraque. You said that. Eric Goddard, Aaron Asham. A lot of big time heavyweights have come through Pittsburgh, man. If you really think about it, so there's been a bunch of them that have come through to protect Sid and the boys.
That there have. Well, to enforcers from enforcers to this week's food question, we get question number 3 from Brian. Again, back to food. This time we're talking about pizza, and Robbie is unfortunately not here, but this will go to Snail, probably me as well. I'm not sure if either Garrett or Robbie has ever been to Morgantown, West Virginia, but they have a place there called Pies and Pints. They have all kinds of specialty pizzas that are incredible. And then Brian says, "Sorry, Snail, you can't try it." I have not been to Morgantown, but I do love a good specialty pizza. I guess with Robbie not being here, are we really going to talk about more pineapple on pizza, Snail? I mean, that really, you're on as thin ice as it can get, really, with in relation to this podcast. So if you want to continue to talk about the abominations that you put on your pizza, then I guess I have to give you the floor right now.
Yeah, I guess you do. No, I won't. I won't make you guys go through that. The pineapple on pizza thing, let's put that to rest for the time being. It's probably not the last you'll hear about it. But this place is called Pies and Pints. It's not in Pittsburgh?
Morgantown, West Virginia, home of the West Virginia Mountaineers.
Is West Virginia close to you guys?
Yeah, it's probably like, from where I live, I don't know about Robbie, but from where I live, it's probably like 45 minutes south.
Oh, wow, that's pretty close. Okay. Yeah.
So
it wouldn't be like absurd for you guys to have visited this place. It's not like it's a 4-hour car ride away.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I could go there and make a day trip of it theoretically and be back by dinner time.
Okay, that makes sense. All right. Well, I mean, specialty pizza joint, it's called Pies and Pints. I mean, it doesn't really sound like you can go too wrong with that. Garrett, you don't really like beer, right? You don't really like a cold pint?
No, that's not really my vibe, but I do like pizza, so 1 out of 2, 50% ain't bad.
Something there for everybody. Well, unfortunately, Robbie's not here. I know he would have something to say about this. I knew he would, but I guess sorry, Brian, I think maybe we'll just move on from that one. And maybe if Robbie ends up hopping back in with us, we'll have to pass this back over to him, see if he has any opinion. So question 4 here is from Brian. Over the years, questions were asked about rules that you'd like to see changed or removed altogether. But never what's a rule that you'd like to add. The only rule that Brian would like to see changed is if you have a delayed penalty and score, you still get that power play.
I was racking my brain and trying to figure out what would I like to see added to the NHL rulebook. And Brian's example of a rule being added like that, to me, I was thinking about it. Yeah, that's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant, because I'm all in favor of increasing offense. If you score on that delayed penalty with the extra man, goal scoring in the NHL I think it's gone up in recent seasons and it continues to climb. We're not in the late 90s, early 2000s anymore, talking about the New Jersey Devils and the Trap and the 2-1 games and things like that. But this is just another way for fans want to see goals scored. That's what they pay the tickets for. They don't pay the tickets to see fights. Not to, go right at Snail and the argument that, not the argument, but the discussion we had last week about fighting. People go to these games because they want to see goals scored. They want to see their favorite teams win these games. So after that delayed penalty, getting another 2 minutes or a double minor, if it's 4 minutes, you can have that as well. I think that would be an awesome way to increase goal scoring, increase offense throughout the league. The only other thing that maybe I might have talked about this on an earlier episode of a podcast, but the only thing that I would like to, I guess it would be removed. I guess the trapezoid rule would be removed instead of added, but giving goaltenders the ability to play the puck all behind their crease and sort of facilitate the transition game that way. I'd like to maybe see the removal of the trapezoid, and if goalies want to go out there and get leveled, then so be it. But yeah, other than that, I think that's a brilliant idea from Brian as a way to increase offense, increase the goal scoring. That's the most exciting part of the game, at least in my opinion. So having that there would be a tremendous rule that gets added to the NHL rulebook.
What about letting goalies come across the center ice, like in lacrosse, where like a goalie can actually like jump up and like run up into the play, try to score?
That would be chaotic, and I would be all here for it.
I mean, that would be entertaining. I had one for this. I was kind of racking my brain about, what about if, I'd like your opinion on this too, Garrett. So like, what if in the last, when it's under 2 minutes in a game and there's a power play, the game no longer ends at the 60-minute mark, but you get to finish the entirety of the power play?
That makes a lot. I mean, it's hard because the rule book, and rule books across professional sports are all, like, football is a 60-minute, American football is 60 minutes, hockey is 60 minutes. So I don't know how you sort of circumvent the rule book for a 60-minute regulation game. But any other way to increase offense and, for however long that penalty that power play is, I would be in favor of it. I don't know how you would, this is all hypothetical, but obviously, but if you were to approve something like that, I don't know how you would, what would the terminology, the language that you would have to put in the rule book that would say, okay, it's a 60-minute regulation hockey game, but it's not 60 minutes if you have a power play under the last 2 minutes of regulation. So I guess something like that, maybe you could put some sort of language like that in the rule book. But yeah, that's another way to increase offense, and that's my MO. I love seeing goals scored. I love seeing the superstars score big goals and big moments. So I'd be all for that too.
I guess, yeah, when you think about it like that, everything, all the stats and everything are based off 60 minutes. I don't know. Let's not think too hard about it. That'd be exciting to see. Or like, what about if you had I've heard this talked about before, but like, what about if the penalty kill scores a shorthanded goal, it ends the power play?
Oh, that's a good idea. I don't know if I've ever heard that one before. Yeah, I think that would be really, really unique and a way to go back and forth like that. I think that would be really unique too.
I think it'd be interesting to see like the penalty kill is all around playing defense, but like if there was incentive to score a goal and end the power play, think about how that would like
stars out there. You'd be putting
exactly. There'd be incentive for like there'd be incentive to put like Sid and Jake out there for a penalty kill, or like McDavid and Leon killing penalties because they could score on it. And I think it'd be like, you're giving your stars more chances to score goals, like you said. That's inherently exciting, and it's just like kind of like you'd be awestruck at like, okay, our stars are out there and they're playing shorthanded and they're scoring goals. Like I think that would set up to be pretty exciting.
Question 5 comes from Brian, and this is one that I wanted Snail to answer even before Robbie had to leave and not record this week. But Brian says, "Is a salad really a salad if it doesn't have fries on it? Also, I'd like to add, salads are much better with egg and cheese on them as well." Snail, you living out there in the woods in the Pacific Northwest, I don't know if you've ever seen a salad with French fries on it, but it is a Pittsburgh staple. So
that's a thing. Snail. Is that really a thing?
It is absolutely 125%. That and like Primanti Brothers sandwiches, that is like how you know you're in Pittsburgh, putting fries on a salad.
Wow, I never knew that. That's interesting. So I thought that was like my brain, because I don't know. I just must not know anything about Pittsburgh. I was thinking like, oh, he's like considering poutine a salad, because like I would say poutine's a salad. But you guys actually put French fries on like leafy greens?
Oh yeah, yep, exactly. That's exactly.
Wow.
It's a salad, and then you top it off with French fries.
That's awesome. So when you put fries on the top, does that? I mean, God, do we even go into this? Like, do you put like ranch over the fries?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You do.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
That is interesting. And he says he puts eggs and cheese. I mean, cheese on a salad. I've seen that. I've eaten that myself. An egg though? Like, is it a fried egg or like a hard boiled egg?
I think it's. I mean, I'm not the biggest salad eater in the world, but I'm pretty sure it's hard boiled. I don't think I've never seen grilled eggs or anything of the sort on a salad, but I've definitely seen hard boiled eggs on salads.
I mean, I've definitely seen hard boiled egg, but just reading this with like fries and cheese, I'm just like, oh, is it a grilled? Is it a fried egg on top of there? I don't know. So, is a salad really a salad if it doesn't have fries on it? I would have to say not anymore. Like on my standards, now that I know that that's a thing, I think I need fries. I need fried spuds on my salads from here on out. I mean, what even is a salad? Like, I mean, poutine is like kind of like a salad, right? It's like a Canadian salad. You got the gravy. Not really. I love poutine, but like, dude, I mean, you can like deconstruct things and all of a sudden it's a salad. Like you can take the innards of a burrito and take the tortilla away and throw it in a bowl and it's a burrito bowl, right? Or like a taco salad.
According to the Oxford Dictionary, a salad is a cold dish of various mixtures of raw or cooked vegetables, usually seasoned with oil, vinegar, or another dressing, and sometimes accompanied by meat, fish, or other ingredients. So this definition has a salad strictly as a cold dish. However, I can see it's sort of like an amalgamation of vegetables you just put together in a bowl. So I mean, I could see the argument you have about calling poutine a salad or deconstructing a burrito and, doing that sort of thing. But like when you think of a traditional salad, you're thinking of leafy greens, tomatoes, maybe some carrots, cucumbers, that sort of thing. Yeah. So I guess that's a salad in the traditional sense, but there are various takes on salads wherever you go, really across the globe.
Well, you learn something new every day. I'd like some clarity. Like, I need to see a photo of one of these, like, Pittsburgh salads with the fries on it. That's interesting.
I'll put it in the group chat after we're done recording.
And you said something about, like, Pamani Brothers. I've heard you guys mention that so many times on here. It's a local, is that like a local chain?
Yes, it's local to Pittsburgh, or not Pittsburgh, but parts of Western Pennsylvania and Florida. There are the company expanded down to Florida because I imagine a lot of Pittsburgh retirees, that's where they go and they can get a taste of Pamani Brothers down there as well. So in case this is your first time listening or you don't know what a Pamani Brothers sandwich is, it's a sandwich, but you get your choice of meat and then the hallmarks of the sandwich are a vinegar-based coleslaw and French fries on top of the sandwich. That's really what makes a Pamani Brothers sandwich. Is you put French fries on top of the meat and you put a vinegar-based coleslaw on top of the meat as well, and that's really the hallmarks of a Pamani Brothers sandwich. Like I said, another Pittsburgh staple. If you couldn't tell already, for Snail and anyone else who hasn't been to Pittsburgh, we love our potatoes and we love our French fries on things that maybe they shouldn't be on. But in terms of salads and Pamani Brothers sandwiches, absolutely. French fries belong on those sandwiches.
We should talk to this Pamani Brothers, or is it Pamanis or Primanis?
Yeah, Primanti.
We should get them to sponsor the pod.
I don't know anybody that works with Pamani Brothers. I don't know what their what kind of plugs that they would like to have sponsored on this Pittsburgh Penguins podcast. But if anyone listening to this podcast is working for Pamani Brothers and knows anybody in their marketing department, hit me up on Twitter, and I'd love to facilitate some sort of partnership, some sort of sponsorship there. Absolutely.
I mean, we pretty much give them a free ad. It feels like every other week now.
You know what? You're right. You're right, Snail. We do give them free airtime every other week when we get these food questions.
All right, we'll move on from that. But yeah, I look forward to seeing these salads with fries on them. I might have to implement that over here in my household. We're going now to question 6, I believe, from Brian. Brian asks, do you miss when the rivalries with the Caps, Flyers, and even the Islanders were at their peaks? Those games that those games where there was so much hatred were fun to watch.
Those playoff games against the Capitals in, I think it was 15-16 and 16-17. Those games against the Capitals and even I wouldn't consider the Tampa Bay Lightning a rivalry, but those playoff games took years off of my life. And I think it was I think Bonino scored a series winning goal against the Capitals. I think that's what it that's okay. That's what I thought. My memory is not great, in case you couldn't tell. But going back to the origin of this question, the Capitals, the Capitals and the Flyers, even when Crosby and Malkin hang it up, those are still going to be the premier rivalries for this team. So much hatred has developed in the Flyers' case since the Penguins came into the league in 67, and the Flyers basically dominating the Penguins until Lemieux came, and the Capitals have been intertwined with the Penguins since Ovechkin's arrival and Malkin and Crosby's emergence in the mid-2000s. Still, so much hatred and so many things in hockey history are intertwined between these three franchises: the Penguins, Flyers, and Capitals. And less so the Islanders. There was probably a rivalry before my time in the 80s and 90s, but as I'm speaking as a modern fan from the mid 2000s onwards, there really hasn't been a rivalry there. But the Capitals and Flyers, that's it. And the Flyers and the Capitals, those are the two premier rivals for this Pittsburgh team. Even when Crosby and Malkin and Ovechkin, they all hang it up, and we enter this new era without these superstars, there's still going to be a healthy hatred there just because of everything that has transpired over the last 20 years. Question number 7 from Brian. This will go to Snail. Who is your go-to Smash Brothers character? I haven't played video games since I was a teenager, but I almost always use Kirby, Link, or Captain Falcon. I just love swallowing people with Kirby and pooping them out. I don't think we've ever had a description of Kirby on the podcast, and I don't think we've ever talked about Kirby pooping his opponents out on the podcast as well. So I will say this before I give it over to you, Snail. I was never a big Nintendo player when I was a kid. It was like strictly PlayStation 2, Xbox 360, and then like back to PlayStation. My brother-in-law is a big Nintendo fan, but I mean, looking at some of the Smash Brothers character, obviously you have Mario, Donkey Kong, Yoshi, Link, and Kirby. I love Kirby for the same reasons that Brian mentioned. He loves Kirby. All of those traditional Mario characters, I think you can pick from, but with me and my lack of experience when it comes to Nintendo and Nintendo games, I'm going to go with Brian and just agree that I love watching Kirby swallow things that he probably shouldn't be swallowing, like cars, and in this case, people. But Snail, I'll give it over to you if you have anything else you want to add about Smash Bros.
Yeah, actually, you kind of touched on it before I got into the characters. I was gonna ask, like, when you were growing up, were you more of like a Nintendo guy or a Sega Genesis? But were you too young for the N64?
Yeah, that was just probably just before I was born. I'd have to go look in Wikipedia and see the launch dates of like the N64 and the Genesis. But my brother-in-law is 31, 32. I'm 25. So there's a real gap there, age gap in the mid to late 90s / early 2000s that I missed out on. And my first real memory of gaming came with a PlayStation 2, just to give you a general idea of like what I grew up with. But yeah, like I really missed out on the mid to late 90s and like all of the games that my brother-in-law loves and grew up with. I never got to play just because I wasn't born. I could go on and do like emulation on my PC, but yeah, I missed that window of like late 90s, early 2000s.
So have you gone back and played the original N64 Super Smash Bros?
No, I have not.
Okay. Yeah, oh man, what a classic game. I remember, like, I have like a very vivid memory of like receiving that game as a gift from my parents. And it was so hyped up. Like there were commercials for Smash Bros on TV at the time. And I remember I called up my childhood best buddy and I was like, dude, I got Smash Bros. Like you got to come over. And he came over and spent the night, and we spent the entirety of the night into the morning playing Smash Bros, trying to unlock characters and all that. Classic, awesome game. So to Brian's question, My go-to Smash Bro character was also Kirby because he was so OP. You can steal people's, you can, swallow them up and poop them out, and then you gain one of their powers. And I feel like his controls were just like, out of all the playable characters or whatever, like Kirby's controls were like the easiest, maybe, or like the most like. I don't know what it was. Just controlling Kirby compared to like any other character, it was like easy to kind of dominate, I think. So my favorite was using Kirby and then actually swallowing Samus. I don't know if you know who Samus is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Anyways, you'd swallow him and you'd get Samus's like energy gun thing. That was like a goated combo. If I wasn't choosing Kirby though, I'd choose like Link, like Brian said, and Samus. I liked when you first unlock Captain Falcon. That's kind of a big deal in the game, and he has that Falcon punch, which is pretty iconic from Super Smash Bros. But like, I could never really get used to him. So, anyways, I love that we're talking about Smash Bros. On here. That's super nostalgic. I'm gonna have to hop on my see-through green N64 later and maybe play a few rounds of good old Smash Bros. All right, we'll move on here to question 8 from Brian. Do you think Marcus Pettersson is severely underrated? The lack of respect he's received since acquiring Carlson is crazy.
There definitely seems to be that feeling, right? That he is underrated, but he's almost like a silent assassin. He'll chip in every now and again with a goal, but the fact that you don't notice him on the ice for the most part is a really good thing. He's not really a flashy offensive defenseman like Erik Karlsson is, but between Pettersson and Ryan Graves, whoever Pettersson is going to be matched with, whether it's Letang or Karlsson, I think that's the perfect yin and yang that you have for your top 4. Karlsson and Letang are guys who obviously are known for jumping up into the play and contributing offensively, whereas Graves and Pettersson can afford to stay back and sort of become that traditional stay-at-home defenseman. I was looking at some of Pettersson's advanced stats, and when there were rumors, I think going back to last year's draft, that Pettersson was on the block and Ron Hextall was thinking about trading away Pettersson. And we had talked on this very podcast about trading away Pettersson because his salary cap, just because it was going to be salary cap relief for the Penguins to bring in someone else. And that obviously never materialized. And the Penguins are better off for that, because you look at this hypothetical top 4 of Graves, Letang, Karlsson, and Pettersson. That is tremendous depth that you can ice basically at any point in the game. Pettersson doesn't do one thing spectacularly well, but it's almost like you don't notice him. And that's a good thing that you don't notice him. He's not going to make an errant mistake in the offensive zone. He's typically pretty responsible in his own zone as well. He's a lanky guy who can sort of help in the transition game. I think he's like 6'3", 180 or 6'3", 185. So he can definitely skate. Like I said, he'll chip in from the point every now and again with an odd goal. But because you don't notice him, that is the good thing. You're more inclined to notice his partner, whether it's going to be Letang or Karlsson. And like I said, those are going to be the guys that are going to facilitate the majority of the offense on this blue line. So, yeah, Marcus Pettersson does sort of create this reputation for himself that he is underrated. And maybe that's a good thing for the Penguins, because you don't have teams knocking on the door trying to acquire his services. And that makes the Penguins a better team, like I mentioned, because you have that 1-2 punch. You have that offense coming from Letang or Karlsson, and you have that steady stream, a typically responsible defensive defender, either in Ryan Graves or Marcus Pettersson. So I think he's underrated, but he's underrated for all of the right things he does in his game. He plays the game the right way, as Mike Sullivan would always say. All right, question number 9. We will go back to Brian here. This will go to Snail. Would you like to see the NHL go back to wearing white jerseys at home and colored jerseys on the road?
Well, Brian, this took me no time at all to come up with an answer, and it's just no. I like the colored jerseys.
Really? Wow, I did not think you were going to go there.
Yeah, I like the color jerseys at home actually, and I think that I just think it looks. I like the like especially when the Penguins like brought back those what was their slogan for like the 15-16 cup run? It was like what was it like something about gold? Like
I mean,
they had a because those jerseys they're wearing were their like reverse retro type deal or something, or it was like their alternate, but they switched to them for
yes,
like
yeah,
part of the playoffs.
yep.
And when they had those, I remember like I was thinking about kind of not this like I was thinking about this concept, and I was like, no, I love the black and gold at home. Like I just think it, I think it fits, feels right. What? So you don't feel that way, Garrett?
I think the white is super crisp, and I'd love to see it. I mean, I don't have, as I've made clear on this podcast many times before, I don't have many jerseys in my collection. However, when Erik Karlsson was acquired, the first thing I wanted to do was buy a white slash away jersey with Karlsson's name and number on it. I think the white is so crisp, especially the Penguins white jersey. And I think the NBA does this too. The NBA in NBA home games, you wear white at home and you wear colored jerseys on the road. And I'm not sure. I think the NHL switched their philosophy or flip flopped it coming out of the lockout in 04, 05. And I think that's when that change started. But before then, yeah, like go back and watch games of the 80s and 90s Penguins at home, and they're wearing their white jerseys that you probably see today. So I've always been in favor of wearing white at home. I think it just looks so nice and so crisp, at least from a Penguins fan's perspective. But yeah, wow, I'm honestly surprised, Snail. I thought you'd be more of a traditionalist and say and agree with Brian. Maybe not agree. I don't know if Brian wants the white jerseys at home, but for me, yeah, like I'd love to have that switch be permanent.
Huh. Yeah, no. As far as being a traditionalist, not in this case. I think that the color jerseys are just they pop and they're so sharp at home, and I don't know about you. So I like you touched on it very lightly there that you don't really have a lot of jerseys in your collection. I have three jerseys in my collection. I got one on my wall and a couple tucked away for you know dressing my Sundays best and whatnot. But dude, I could never own a white jersey because I'm like the sloppiest eater. Like I'm just a complete mess. I would never be able like, dude, I don't even really own any white t-shirts because every time I get a white t-shirt, I mean, whether it's coffee that morning or some sort of like food or whatever, like I can't keep food in my mouth, it seems. So I would just never be able to actually own one. And the black jerseys are able to disguise a lot of my, yeah, kind of disguise all the stains that I come out from the food in my mouth.
I'll see that because the one jersey I do have is it's a black Mario Lemieux, and there have been times where I have stained that as well. So I can see where you're coming from that reasoning because white does stain very 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 easily. So I'll see your reasoning and I'll agree with it there.
I should send this to the group chat. Like I have a Malkin, like it's from the 2014-15 season, a Malkin jersey, and got mustard on like one of the very few white parts, and it's like it's clearly there. Like even after numerous attempts to kind of get that out of there, like the one very small area of white on that jersey has a yellow mustard stain. We could probably go on with jersey talk for quite a while. Question 10 from Brian. Why is Gary Bettman so hated? This is a good one. The guy can't attend any event without being booed.
Gary Bettman and Roger Goodell and Rob Manfred, they're all from the fans' perspective, they're all like the evil Emperor Darth Sidious. You know, they're no matter what you do, no matter where you go, it's like they're the reincarnation of evil personified. And I don't know if maybe it's the corporateness of Gary Bettman, if that's a word, corporateness, or the corporate feel, or the fact that to some people, Gary Bettman just looks like an evil kind of low budget movie supervillain. But yeah, the same thing goes for Roger Goodell. You watch the NFL draft, the NHL NFL draft, any of those drafts, those commissioners are getting booed. And why are they getting booed? Maybe your guess is as good as mine, honestly. There's probably a plethora of reasons why Gary Bettman and Roger Goodell, all of these professional sports commissioners, get booed for changing the game, rule changes, all that sort of thing. But it is funny. Imagine just Gary Bettman going to a nice, fancy, upscale dinner in like New York with his wife or family, and sitting down in like some fancy restaurant and just getting booed by guys wearing, suits and ties, and he really, like Brian says, he wouldn't be able to go anywhere. Go to the grocery store, pick out some cereal, and go to the bread aisle and just picking out some bread, and he just gets booed by a random passerby. But yeah, that hatred, and you see Goodell, you see Roger Goodell, you see Gary Bettman, they play into it. They know their reputation is what it is, but at the end of the day, they know what their jobs are: to serve the 32 owners of the hockey league, of the National Football League. That's their job. Their job is to act as the public face for the 32 owners of the NFL and the NHL. And the fact that Gary Bettman and Roger Goodell are still in their commissioner positions means that the owners approve of what these guys are doing. So that's why you don't see too many commissioner changes at the top level of these professional sports leagues, because these commissioners do the bidding of the 32 owners. And so far, if any indication is to be believed, the owners in the NHL and the NFL are satisfied with what Gary Bettman and Roger Goodell do, respectively.
I mean, it is kind of like odd. I mean, wouldn't you say he's done like a pretty good job as a commissioner? Like, the game has grown exponentially. And I think maybe he gets a little bit of hate because I think maybe the growth of the game, like, that's kind of rubbed some traditionalists maybe wrong, like, earlier on. But I mean, wouldn't you say he's done actually like a pretty solid job?
I forget when his tenure started. I think it was in the early to mid 90s. But yeah, you could argue from that point. Yeah, there have definitely been some lockouts that have disrupted the game, and especially looking at the 04-05 lockout, where you didn't even have a season at that point. But for the most part, looking at Gary Bettman's resume, he has done a lot of good for the league, and has sort of transformed the game. He's put teams in exotic markets. There's no question about it. Would hockey work in the desert? That's a question that we still really don't have an answer to, as the Coyotes are still dealing with arena issues. Will the Coyotes relocate to a place like Houston? There were talks for years that that fans wanted a team back in Quebec City for the Nordiques, or putting another team in the New England area for the Hartford Whalers. But for the most part, Bettman has remained steadfast in his determination to try and make hockey work in these southern markets like Nashville, Arizona. It really didn't work in Atlanta, but that, I don't know if you could really blame Gary Bettman for that. More so you blame the ineptitude of the owners, who basically ran out of money and didn't have a place to play hockey. But yeah, for the most part, Gary Bettman has sort of revolutionized the game as he entered the new millennium. And I'm not here to really sing the praises of Gary Bettman. I don't care for him or Roger Goodell, but you can't deny how the game has really grown, for the most part, on a positive note, from his tenure in the early 90s through where it is now.
I feel like he gets a lot of hate based off of things that are actually, I mean, he works for the owners, kind of like what you said, right? So it's like, I think he gets a lot of hate because of the Olympics. I think it's a crime that we haven't had Olympics during kind of right now in where Crosby's at in his career, playing with like McDavid and McKinnon. Like, they blame him for that, but I think it's the owners that are kind of holding that whole thing up. And I've heard arguments that Gary's making the game soft, and I mean, I think the game is getting soft, but I don't think that's Gary's fault. I mean, you could blame modern health and science and the proof that CTE is real and what causes it. And, he implements this board of like player safety, and they make the calls. So I think sometimes it's unfair that Gary gets so much hate, because ultimately I think he's actually done quite a bit of good for the league. We've seen cups won in LA, Tampa, Anaheim, without those, and in the desert, like you said, Garrett, it's, kind of jury's still out if that's ever going to work out. But you get like an Austin Matthews out of Arizona, superstar in the league right now. I mean, you can kind of thank Gary for for a player like him. So anyways, we can move on from this, but it's some, like, to Brian's question, it doesn't really, sometimes it doesn't really add up why he gets so much hate, but he owns it and he's a pretty good sport about it. I think he's pretty good for the game, I would say.
All right. Question number 11. We're switching it up here. We're going back to our friend from, I believe, if I remember correctly, it's Denmark, who asked a question last week. You'll never walk alone, Justice97, the big Liverpool fan from across the pond. Would you like to see Nikolai Ehlers or Oliver Bjorkstrand in a Penguins uniform? If yes, which player would you like to see the most? And what do you think that either player could contribute if they were in the black and gold?
Actually, yeah, like I can answer this pretty easily. I would totally take Nikolai Ehlers as a Penguin. Haven't really thought much about what it would take to get him. He's a pretty solid winger in Winnipeg. I feel like a few years ago, maybe 2019 or something, there was actually just on social media, there was some rumblings that maybe the Penguins were looking at a Nikolai Ehlers over in Winnipeg in some sort of trade deadline deal. Never ended up happening, obviously, but I honestly, I remember Oliver Bjorkstrand in Columbus a little bit, and I never really went out of my way to look up his stats after a game or something. I always kind of felt the only reason I really know much about him is because I live here in Seattle and Seattle picked him up, and that got me a little bit curious about him. I'd never watched a game and been like, and circled Bjorkstrand and been like, oh, that guy popped off tonight. That guy was noticeable. So with that, Nikolai Ehlers has done that. I've watched games of his where he's a crafty winger. He's pretty much a lock to score 20, 6 foot tall. Put him on a line with Gino or Sid, and I think you inflate his stats even more. No disrespect to Scheifele and Blake Wheelers, but that's just kind of what Gino and Sid do. So yeah, I mean, I would take a Nikolai Ehlers any day of the week and twice on Sunday. What about you, Garrett? You have any input on either of these players?
I don't know these players incredibly in depth. I know both of these players would be very valuable top 9 assets, both Bjorkstrand and Ehlers. I think Ehlers is a better player than Bjorkstrand, and I think Ehlers is he's still in Winnipeg, isn't he?
Yeah, he is.
That's what I thought. I think Ehlers is probably, I don't want to say more elite than Bjorkstrand, but I think I would rather see Ehlers than Bjorkstrand on a top line role with either Crosby or Malkin. But yeah, I couldn't sit here and say that I know these two players incredibly in depth. Vaguely from when the Penguins play these West Coast teams, whether it's Seattle or Winnipeg, you only see them a couple of times a year. But from what I do know from Ehlers and Bjorkstrand, both players are very solid top 9, even you could argue top 6. And in Ehlers' case, I think he could be a very valuable top line asset.
Yeah, either way, both of them are pretty good players. I've seen a little bit of Bjorkstrand more here in Seattle, and he's a lot better than I gave him credit for. I never was like, yeah, boo, Bjorkstrand, you stink, but like, he's definitely a good winger. Honestly, for top 9 purposes, probably take either of them if you didn't have to give up too much. Let's see, moving on here to a question number 12 from Tony Nikunin. And Tony asks, who is your favorite Finnish-born Penguin of all time and why?
So the Penguins don't really have a really storied history with Finnish players. The first Finnish player that came to mind, well, there's two. In recent history, Olli Mata, who was drafted in the first round by the Penguins, had a high draft pedigree, and he was bang average in his time here in Pittsburgh. He sort of found himself again, I think most recently with the Detroit Red Wings. But the first player that came to mind, he was here for a short period of time, but he was very, very popular player who had great positional flexibility. It was Jussi Jokinen. I remember watching Jussi Jokinen. I think it was 2012, 2013, 2014. His hands, especially in the shootout, were amazing. I mean,
phenomenal in the shootout.
I think he's statistically, I don't have the shootout stats in front of me. Statistically, he's one of the best all-time shootout players. His mitts, I hate these hockey cliches and hockey speak, but his mitts were just so silky. And he could play in the bottom six, he could play alongside Malkin or Crosby if needed. He was just that versatile of a player as a forward. And so that was the first Finnish player that came to mind. I absolutely loved watching Jussi Jokinen play with Crosby and Malkin, and I loved watching him in the shootout. Question number 13. We'll go back to, I think we're just going to call, I don't know what this fella's first name is. I don't know if he's included his first name in a tweet, but for mailbag purposes, we're going back to our friend in Denmark. We're just going to call you Justice97. You're the Liverpool fan. I could just call you the Liverpool fan. Question number 13. What Penguins jersey is your favorite, and what is your worst, I guess, least favorite Penguins jersey, Snail?
So I'm a huge fan of that. I'm a huge fan of it, but I don't know the name of it. They were their alternate jerseys, I believe, from last year. They're like the retro, they're black and gold with the diagonal lettering, kind of like the Rangers lettering.
Yeah.
I love that jersey. I just think it looks sharp. I love the diagonal lettering on it. And then as far as like what's my least favorite jersey is, there's actually a few that I hate. I hated, dude, the one that really stands out to me is that alternate jersey from 2019. I think it had to have been 2019. It looked like if you were to order a like Chinese Penguins jersey from wish.com, and there was a lot of like just shit memories in it too. Like I just feel like every time I watched them in that jersey, Jack Johnson was doing something egregious and taking like 2 double minors in like the span of like 5 seconds. I hate that one. I honestly don't like any of the Penguins jerseys that have blue. I think they've had a couple blue jerseys. Yeah. Wow. How do you guys in Pittsburgh feel about those blue jerseys?
I mean, the blue jerseys have terrible memories associated with them. The first Winter Classic against Buffalo that had the lighter of the 2 blue jerseys, I like that. I like that jersey a lot. The second Winter Classic does not carry fond memories for a variety of reasons, that being the jersey Crosby was wearing when he was concussed. I think the Penguins have had some bad luck wearing blue jerseys, and that's why you haven't really seen it resurrected in the later portions of the Crosby-Malkin era. But as an alternate, as a throwback, I love the blue because it's so incredibly different to when you think of Pittsburgh and you think of Pittsburgh sports, you think of black and gold. All 3 teams wear a variation of black and gold because it's the city's colors. It's on the city flag. And blue is just so different from that black and gold that we've all been used to and we love so much. I would be very much in favor of wearing a blue jersey, but I absolutely see why the Penguins don't incorporate it, because there have been quite a few bad memories wearing those blue Winter Classic jerseys.
Yeah, I just think of like Sid getting hurt in that one of the darker of the blue jerseys.
Yep, that was the darker of the blue.
Yeah, Sid's a superstitious guy. I can be kind of a superstitious guy. I almost feel like maybe, knowing how superstitious Sid is, do you ever wonder if maybe he's like, we're not using any of those?
I have no evidence, but I would not be surprised if Sid exercised some of his leeway, because he certainly has a lot of it. I would not be surprised if he talked to the upper management. This was even before Fenway Sports Group came on board, but I would not be surprised if he and Mario sat down and Sid said, I do not want to wear a blue jersey for the rest of my time as an active player.
Wouldn't be shocked at all either. All right. This is question number 14 from Justice97. There is a lot of talk about Erik Karlsson's contract, but do you see any problems with it? If, as expected, the wage bill increases over the next couple of seasons?
Yeah, there's definitely, even when Karlsson was acquired, I saw on Twitter there were people who weren't a fan of having that massive cap hit, that 10 million plus cap hit for Karlsson. But when he was traded, I didn't have a problem with it. I still don't have a problem with it a month later. And I'm not going to have a problem with it 3 or 4 years from now, because like you mentioned, the salary cap is going to increase, giving the Penguins even more flexibility to construct their roster. I was just reading an article in The Athletic today, and I think you can hypothesize that over the next 3 seasons, the salary cap could increase anywhere from $10 to $12 million over the next 3 or so seasons, if recent estimates are to be believed, and that's what actually happens. So I have no problem with Erik Karlsson's contract. I won't have a problem with it. Like I said, 3 years from now, you acquire Erik Karlsson and you take on that contract for one reason. You're avoiding the rebuild at all costs, and you're giving this core one more group to try and really win a championship. And that's why I was such in favor of Kyle Dubas swinging this trade for Karlsson, because it gives Crosby and Malkin and Letang one last really good hurrah, one last really good go round to try and win one more Stanley Cup. After that, even if they don't win another championship, I am satisfied with what this core has done over the last nearly 20 years. You can't ask for anything more than what the Penguins of this era have given the fans. So again, going back to Karlsson, I have no problem with the contract. The salary cap is set to increase, you could argue, exponentially over the next 3 to 5 seasons since we're out of the COVID era lockdowns and the salary cap remaining flat. We're done seeing that. So I have no qualms about Erik Karlsson as a player or his contract as we get to watch him for his first season in Pittsburgh. Question number 15, back to Justice 97 here. How do you see the goalie situation playing out? Would you strengthen it at all? And do you think Tristan Jarry can take us all the way to the promised land?
Well, would I strengthen it? Hell yeah. I was very much in favor of, I'm just going to be honest. Like I have my doubts about Jarry. I know that there's a lot of Jarry faithfuls out there, and there's a lot of people that take it far more extreme than I do. Would I have strengthened it? Yes. I think that like going for, I was on the Gibson train, bring Gibson back home to Pittsburgh, or let's really swing for the fences here and get something done with Hellebuck, give Winnipeg whatever they need and get a Hellebuck over here. More so in favor of that than actually when the Karlsson rumor started, I was like, wait, what about Hellebuck? Like, anyways. So yeah, would I have strengthened it? Yes. Can Jarry take us all the way? I have my doubts, but like if he's healthy and he comes in with, this mindset that there's no longer any doubt about him being our main guy in net. This is his net. And, sometimes I wonder if maybe with the looming contract, like, did that shake his confidence? But no, this is he's got the long-term deal. Is he due for a bounce back season, and can he kind of just take it and run with it from there? You hope so. That's kind of how I see it. It's probably not the most positive light on the goaltending situation. I feel like there were just so many times where Jarry really had, he was in the playoffs a few times, and there was just so many saves that I wish he could have made. And I'll kind of digress from that. I would be really curious to hear what Garrett's thoughts are on should they have strengthened the goaltending, and is Jarry really the guy to take us all the way? But that's where I stand. I'm happy with our backup situation. I like Nedeljkovic. I think he's a promising young goaltender who, he was on a bad team in Detroit and he was playing very meaningful games in Carolina. So could you get a healthy competition going in net where Jarry's like, I don't want to lose this. I got to play my best tonight. And you got Nedeljkovic, who's on a pretty fair contract, but he could jump in and really, he's had some flashes of showing quite a bit of promise. So anyways, I'm going to throw it over to Garrett.
You have no choice. You have no choice when it comes to Tristan Jarry. And I think Kyle Dubas realized that it was going to be incredibly difficult to probably swing a trade for a Connor Hellebuck. And I wanted no part of John Gibson myself. I think John Gibson's best days are very much behind him. So you have Tristan Jarry, who is still a member of your roster. I think Kyle Dubas's hands were tied, because it's not like the UFA market, the free agent market, was filled with top tier elite goaltenders, because it wasn't. So you have a guy like Jari who's on your roster. Yeah, 5 years may be a little bit rich for my blood, but 5 years from now, Crosby and Malkin aren't going to be here. So this team is going to look incredibly different 5 years from now. So you do with what you have, and the Penguins had Tristan Jarry. And you could argue he was the best option on that unrestricted free agent market. I don't think he even made it to unrestricted free agency. And if he did, then he wasn't there for very long, obviously. So Kyle Dubas, his hands were tied as far as I'm concerned. Snail mentioned it. If Jarry can stay healthy, I mean, I don't think Jarry is a top 5 goaltender. He's not in the same class as a Andrei Vasilevsky or maybe even a Hellebuck. But you don't need elite goaltending, I don't think, given what the Penguins have on offense and defense. You just need bang average or above average goaltending. And I think Tristan Jarry can give you that. Whether or not he stays healthy is a conversation we'll probably have throughout the regular season, because he wasn't able to prove himself. He was injured in the New York Rangers series. The year before that, he completely melted down against the New York Islanders and cost the Penguins that series. So we're still waiting to see what kind of goaltender is Tristan Jarry is in the postseason. Is this season going to be that season where he proves himself and maybe takes them on a deep run? We have to wait and see. But between factors that were out of his control and between the Penguins not making the postseason last season under Ron Hextall, his injury against the New York Rangers in the Rangers series, he really could only play on one leg for Game 7. He melted down against the Islanders the year before. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of external and internal pressure on Jarry. You have the contract. You have the big money that you were chasing as an unrestricted free agent heading into this offseason. Now you have to go prove it. He's been an all-star, and he's deserved those all-star honors, but let's see how healthy he can really stay. Can he play 60-ish games, 60-plus games? And can you give Nedeljkovic or Magnus Hellberg, whoever ends up being the backup netminder, because it won't be Casey DeSmith, can you give the backup, 15 to 20 games and take on that starter's load? It just remains to be seen. But for the most part, yes, I think Tristan Jarry is capable of taking this team and winning a Stanley Cup. I don't think Jarry is some ham and egger jabroni who doesn't have any prior experience or success at the NHL level, because he very much does. The health will be the biggest question that Jarry has to answer coming into this season.
I'm curious to know, I wish Robbie was here for this too, but Garrett, where were you at when kind of the rumblings were coming up regarding bringing Marc-Andre Fleury back to Pittsburgh?
It would have been nice as as a sentimental signing. And I still think Fleury can be an effective goaltender, but he in no way, shape, or form can handle a starter's load at his age. I think he's 38, 39, if not close to it. And here's the thing. If you were going to re-sign Marc-Andre Fleury, the first time Tristan Jarry, or whoever was your starting goaltender, the first time that goalie makes a mistake or has a bad game, everyone in Pittsburgh is going to be calling to start Marc-Andre Fleury. That's just how popular and beloved of a player he was while he was in Pittsburgh. But that doesn't mean that he has the skill at this point in his career necessary to take on a starter's load. He is a perfectly serviceable, you could argue 1B to a Tristan Jarry 1A, but I do not want to be here in that alternate reality where Marc-Andre Fleury is on this roster, and every time Tristan Jarry makes a mistake or lets in a bad goal, you have a subsect of the Penguins fandom saying, put Fleury in, put Fleury in, put Fleury in. He should have been the starter all along. That's why I was kind of against him signing in Pittsburgh. But as a backup at this point in his career, yeah, I think Fleury could be absolutely put in that role and have success there.
That's a good point on the fans turning on whoever the number one is. In this case, it'd be Jarry. I could totally see that. Any bad goal that goes in, just take him out and put Flower in. It kind of actually makes you really appreciate the mental gymnastics that Sullivan was going through in the cup runs with balancing the Murray and Flower tandem there with the injuries and the bad games and who to put in next, right? Like, you kind of think about, to your point, like about the fans or whatever, that must have been a crazy time kind of entertaining that whole deal with Murray going down for a bit and then putting in Flower and then trusting his gut with who to put in next.
Fleury took so much pride in his game. He wanted to be the starter, and that's eventually what he got when he was taken by the Golden Knights. He wanted to be the starter, but he wasn't oblivious to the fact that Matt Murray had a lot of success at the AHL level, and he basically came up and exploded right out of the gate at the NHL level. So the writing was on the wall for Fleury. As sad as it was to see him go, you took the younger, cheaper option in Matt Murray at the time. But yeah, I mean, Matt Murray at that point in his career wouldn't have had an ego because it was Fleury's net for so many years. But yeah, a balancing act for sure, because you don't want to be in a position where you disgruntle Fleury. But I think Fleury is enough of a professional at this point in his career to realize, okay, Murray has the hot hand. He's the young gun. He's been leading this team to success. So, I mean, yeah, it surely wasn't an easy situation for Mike Sullivan, but I mean, they managed it, and in both years, 16 and 17, they got Stanley Cups out of it. So what more can you ask for?
Very true. Moving on here to question 16 from Justice97. Do you have any idea why PPG Arena doesn't have the equipment to show video on the ice? Is it too expensive, too demanding to install? What do you think the reason is?
So I'm not entirely sure. Video equipment in terms of like what you see in Vegas, like projectors on the ice and like laser shows and that sort of thing. But video, I guess in like pregame ceremonies, you can see video get projected on the ice and sort of watch some archival footage that way. But if you're talking about like what Vegas does, they have this really extravagant pregame ceremony with lasers and lights and video projected from all various angles onto the ice and that sort of thing. I don't think at this point, especially with the owners that are in charge of the Penguins now, Fenway Sports Group, they're not afraid to spend money, even if that means spending money to upgrade the facility. So I think it's something that really, I don't know, the Penguins, it wasn't really their thing to project video, or, that what really wasn't part of their pregame routine for the fans and attendance. I don't think expense is not a concern with Fenway Sports Group owners demanding to install. If there's a will, there's a way, especially with the basically open checkbook of FSG and that ownership. I just don't think it's at the top of the list of trying to get equipment installed into the arena. Question number 17, the penultimate question in this week's mailbag. This one comes from Linus J. Where do you see Magnus Hellberg playing this season? Is he a Pittsburgh Penguins goaltender, or is he in Wilkes-Barre Scranton? Can he compete with Alex Nedeljkovic?
I think he's in Wilkes-Barre. I think that's where he will begin his tenure in the Penguins organization. Just kind of, I mean, I was looking at his history and his statistics, and also Ned's stats. I just think that Magnus is a little bit older. I mean, dude, this guy has bounced around. He has been on a couple continents, couple different leagues. He actually broke into the NHL back in 2013-14. Just looking at his record too from last year, I think he had like a 4-8 record. I think with him being a little bit older and more well-traveled, I guess you could say, I think he's going to be the veteran down in Wilkes-Barre, and then you're going to have Nedeljkovic and Jari as the 1-2. But yeah, that's kind of how I see it. You never know. Maybe he has an unreal training camp and they send Nedeljkovic down, and you get Magnus backing up Jari to start the season. I actually didn't know too much about him prior to the Penguins signing him, so I had to do a little bit of digging. So I don't know. You have anything to add to that, Garrett?
Not really. As blunt as that is, it's probably going to be Alex Nedeljkovic being the backup here. There, like you said, there could be a competition in training camp and preseason to see who earns that backup spot now that Casey DeSmith is out of town in Montreal. So yeah, it's a wait and see kind of thing. But for the most part, I think my money is on Nedeljkovic being the backup to Tristan Jarry, and Hellberg being that number 3 break glass in case of emergency goaltender you have in Wilkes-Barre.
Agreed. All right, and I think this is our last question of this week's mailbag. I really like this question. This is from Linus J. Considering the Scandinavian competition from Denmark a few weeks ago, as a Swede, I have to step up my question game. And he asks, who is the best Swede to have played for the Pittsburgh Penguins?
So just in this mailbag alone, we had a question about the top Finnish-born players, and I mentioned, I think that was from who was that from? That was from Justice 97, I think it was. Yeah, best Finnish-born player of all time and why. So now we go and look at Team Sweden here, if you want to call it that. The Penguins have had a bit more success with the Swedish players throughout their history. You have players like Ulf Samuelsson, Marcus Naslund, who was here for a cup of coffee. He was the one that got away. Of course, Naslund had more success in Vancouver than he did with the Pittsburgh Penguins, but Naslund was a member of the Penguins before he broke out with the Canucks. My money, though, is on Patrick Hornqvist. And maybe that's recency bias because I am a younger fan, but Patrick Hornqvist, for so long, took that beating in front of the net. He was the last draft pick in Sidney Crosby's draft class, who just recently retired in this offseason just a couple of weeks ago. So happy trails to Patrick Hornqvist. He had an incredibly accomplished career, always took a beating in front of the net for Crosby and Malkin, always agitating the goaltender, agitating opposition players. He is very fondly remembered in Pittsburgh circles, and rightfully so. So my money for the best Swedish-born player to play for the Penguins is the one and only ultimate grinder, Patrick Hornqvist.
I love that answer. So first of all, that was actually Tony Nikunin who asked about the Finnish-born Penguin.
Oh yeah, you're right. Sorry, I got the questions mixed up. You're right. It was Tony. My apologies.
I just love that we're speaking on behalf of the Scandinavian representation for the Pittsburgh Penguins. I completely and wholeheartedly agree that it's Patrick Hornqvist for this is for my favorite Swede, our podcast's favorite Swede, Stanley Cup winning goal. He's got the heart of a champion. He annoyed the shit out of those the goaltenders and the defensemen. Just played with so much jam in front of the net. But what I like about him is like, and I think Garrett would appreciate this as well. He never really fought too much. Like, he was never really taking dumb penalties. He really played the game the right way and agitated in a way that actually would get the other team to retaliate. And more often than not, we'd end up with the power play, as opposed to some of the other pests in the league. So Patrick Hornqvist, 100% has to be, there's been a lot of great Swedes that played in Pittsburgh, but, especially with the recency bias with the Cups won and stuff, he played such a huge role in both those wins. So I agree wholeheartedly with Patrick Hornqvist.
All right, 18 questions in, 18 questions out. That will wrap it up for another edition of the Penscast Mailbag here at the Skating Penguin Network. Thank you to everyone who contributed this week with all of your amazing questions. And we will be back for Snail, for Robbie Noggle. I have been Garrett Bahana. Thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to all of you again this time next week.